Video, I'm going to talk about Antonio Gramsci's theory of philosophical praxis and cultural hegemony. So, his theory of philosophical praxis focuses on being able to change kind of the economic structure of things, but also the political and cultural hegemony and the cultural power that exists that's extremely unequal. So, this philosophy of praxis is about shaking the foundations of class rule and capitalism into creating a new society. So his theory of cultural hegemony is fascinating, and it's really brought new dimensions to Marxist theory because Marxist theory really focuses on the economic aspects of class domination and um, just unequal power structures. But what's also important to think about here is cultural hegemony, so cultural domination, political domination, intellectual hegemony. So, in order to really think through how to change society, we can't only change the economic structures of it, but we also have to change the cultural and political structures and moral aspects of it. And so, Gramsci's theory is basically saying the proletariat, the revolution is not just inevitable. There has to be there have to be leaders, of course, but at the same time, we also have to think about changing the culture, changing the political and moral aspects of a society. So we don't only need economic leaders, we also need political, moral, intellectual, and cultural leaders in order to really overcome the class inequality of capitalism. So, in a hegemonic society, and hegemony is kind of a fancy word for domination, but it's done through consent and consensus. So the idea here is that the hegemonic class, or the class that holds power over the subaltern classes, or the classes that have less power in all of these realms that I mentioned, so politically, economically, socially, culturally, etc. The hegemonic class is basically holding state power through economic domination, but it's also holding this power through these other aspects of life as well. And they do it through this combination of consent and force, because they make the subaltern classes, or the classes that have less power, believe that they have a say in what they're doing, that they're valued, that they're part of democracy, for example. But in fact, they are coercing them into subordination by saying, oh, yeah, we'll give you this little piece of toast, right, for your obedience and subjugation, basically. So the people who are the subaltern classes, or who are kind of being dominated in a way, don't even always recognize their domination, because they think, oh, I do have a say in this. So it's kind of a false consciousness where the more powerful or hegemonic class does certain things, but in fact does certain things where it seems like they're sacrificing their corporate interest, but it's done to further instill their power, to further instill their domination. So the hegemonic class, of course, thinks about the other classes, but they don't, their policies or ideology is not in favor of the other classes, it's in favor of them. And so what they do then is to try to maintain their power. But of course, they give a little bit every now and then to keep the masses complicit and silent. So there's this economic leadership from the hegemonic class, but it's done through this exercise of state power, where the state is basically a representation of this hegemony of one class over the subaltern classes. And it's done through both seemingly private institutions, such as he says, the church, certain schools, etc., businesses, and also public institutions. So the police, the military, public schools, other aspects of life that we all are a part of. So these different kinds of organizations, both private and public, are a means of the hegemonic class attaining state power and attaining state control. And it's done through the simultaneous exercise of force, but also consensus. So making people believe or think that they have a say and that they have power when in fact they don't. So in order to overcome this, in order to change this hegemony where you have the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class exercising over the proletariat or the working class, the proletariat class has to become class conscious, right? So not only is there going to inevitably be this over this proletariat overthrow of the capitalist class, and the way Marx talked about it, Gramsci is also saying that the proletariat have to become kind of culturally aware, and they also have to infuse themselves within moral, political, and intellectual and cultural leadership. So it's not solely about economic domination and overthrowing one class economically. It's also about all these other aspects of life and ideology that are just as important. And there has to be some sort of cultural change in order to overcome this cultural hegemony that's occurring. So the working class must attain not only economic leadership, but also cultural, moral, intellectual, and political leadership.